The Denver Broncos started the year off with a record of 5-2. Since then, it has been catastrophe. We have lost 5 games in a row. We have put ourselves out of the playoff picture. Our team is essentially the Titanic. Right now, we are sinking, and we all need to grab life vests while we can. We basically have to save the season today against the Las Vegas Raiders, also with a record of 5-7. If we lose this game, there is pretty much zero chance of us making the playoffs. It may be slim already, but if we want any chance of a miracle run, we've got to find a way to win this game, as we're currently a couple spots behind the current number 7 seed, being Baltimore. Keep in mind, they don't have Lamar Jackson healthy, but there are also like 5 or 6 teams in between the Ravens and us currently, so we can't really get too excited with that. We are now 3/4 of the way through the year. We have just passed our bye week. Thank God. The first time in like a month and a half that we haven't lost. And when I look at our 5-game losing streak, there are some interesting things to point out. Look at the amount of points we scored. 21, 20, 20, 21, and 20. Very consistent. Consistently below average. That would be 20.4 points per game, which would be towards the bottom of the league, whereas our current mark for the entire season is more towards the middle. So the offense hasn't necessarily been good, but you would think the defense is going to have one game where they allow less than 20 points, given how well the defense played last year and how good it was early this season. But that was not the case. We've lost the identity of this team. The pass rush hasn't been as good. The coverage has been a little bit spotty. It feels like there are just too many problems on both sides of the ball right now for us to overcome. It hasn't been a perfect year from Bo Nix. He's had his fair share of misses, but he's working with what he can, and I don't think it's been a bad season from him by any stretch. Nonetheless, we're going to have to make a decision with him this offseason regarding the 5th-year option and then eventually a potential long-term extension. And while he hasn't been bad, has he been good enough to warrant being the franchise quarterback? I don't know. It still feels like he has something to prove, and playing well over these last 5 games would go a long way in doing that. Ashton Jeanty is currently 3rd in the NFL in rushing yards, but it feels like he's regressed from last year prior to the injury. A lot of the explosive plays haven't really been there. Now, granted, he does not have the best offensive line. He doesn't really have a sidekick in the backfield either. Bo Nix, I guess, is the sidekick. But nonetheless, Ashton Jeanty's been inconsistent. The one guy on offense who has been consistently good is Marvin Mims. And he just broke his collarbone. At this rate, Marvin Mims may never get 1,000 yards. He's been this close 3 years in a row. But we have to keep in mind he's now missed 10 games over the last 2 years, and that's going to be something that we remember when we talk about a potential contract extension with him in the offseason. So who's going to replace his production? Of course, Cooper Kupp hopefully will. Tez Johnson played really well last week with 11 receptions in the loss against the Chargers. Of course, he's missed a lot of time. Chris Brazel's going to see some more run. Harold Fannon's going to see some more run. We're going to go deeper into the offensive line in just a moment, as we do with a prospect profile on the offensive line. And we're going to do the same with the defensive line as well. But I will say, I think Baron Browning has been the MVP of the defense this year, because in the games that he's missed where he hasn't been healthy, our pass rush has gone from okay to really bad. I also feel bad for B.J. Ojulari, because he has quite literally not won a single game this year, coming over from the Cardinals to us. Is he the reason why we're losing? I mean, Arizona is still losing without him, so I guess it wasn't necessarily his fault over there. But let's talk about this prospect profile now. We've already gone over the quarterbacks in this draft. We've already gone over the skill position players, and today we're talking about the trenches, the hog mollies, the offensive and defensive lines. These are 2 areas of the roster that we've really invested in, but we haven't necessarily gotten a return on that investment. The offensive line has not played to its standard this year. The defensive line, which was one of the best in the NFL a year ago, has regressed this year. And I think the play up front in the trenches is the biggest reason why our team has been disappointing this year. We traded away a first-round pick for Andrew Thomas on draft night, and that trade has been a massive flop up to this point. However, like Thomas, we've invested so much into the rest of the offensive line that we kind of have to keep these guys. Now, with Thomas, we could still get out of this contract, but it would be a little bit foolish to get out of the deal for a guy who we just traded a first-round pick for. And if we put him back on the trade market, his value would be severely diminished. Rasheed Walker missed some time. He's also been up and down inside. Ben Powers has been inconsistent. Quinn Miners has been inconsistent. I'm really looking to see more from the young guys here down the stretch. Guys like Gus Hartwig at center. Francis Mauigoa, the third rounder at right tackle. He will be making his first career start today against the Las Vegas Raiders. He will be tasked with dealing with Max Crosby, which isn't easy. I do want to make a quick disclaimer before we get started. I recorded this part of the prospect profile before the most previous episode of the Kansas Dynasty, so the stats that I'm going to be showing you guys are prior to everybody's final regular season game, so because of that, numbers might be a little bit different. Player stocks might be slightly up, slightly down. If anybody had a very notable performance in their final regular season game, I will mention it. But nonetheless, an intriguing tackle class. I don't think it's a particularly deep group, but I think there are some good players here at the top on both sides. Tackle's a weird position for us because we've invested a lot at this position in recent years, but again, we haven't necessarily gotten that return on investment. We'll start with Cage Casey out of Boise State. The talented left tackle has been a stalwart on the Broncos offensive line over the last few years, ever since Ashton Genty and Malachi Nelson were still with the Broncos. He's a really well-rounded offensive lineman, in my opinion. A strong anchor in the run game. He's a good pass protector as well. I think he's regressed in that area a little bit this year. He's let up more sacks compared to the last 2 years, but he's also dealing with worse quarterback play. Malachi Nelson, the previous quarterback, was very good at sensing pressure. Maddox Madsen, the current quarterback, not so much. And I think because of that, especially given Casey's size at 6'5", 310, and his athletic profile, it'll be hard to keep him out of the first round, but it's not a conclusion. He will be the first left tackle off the board. I like Raymond Pulido from Arizona quite a bit. 3-year starter, team captain, high character kid, 6'6", 335 pounds. He's got the exact size you look for a starting offensive tackle. I think he's a better and more consistent pass protector than Casey, which probably gives him the higher overall ceiling. He's not the run blocker that Casey is, though. That's the big difference between the two of them, and the reason why right now Pulido is projected to go a little bit after him. But if you prefer the pass protection, if you prefer the elite size, the elite physical profile, then Pulido is probably your guy. I don't think it's an overly deep group at left tackle, though. Only one other player projected into the top 90. That's Harold Sampson from North Carolina. 6'8", 325, another guy who has ideal size and length at the position, and I think given his physical gifts, that gives him a high ceiling, and with the lack of depth at left tackle in this class, that could easily push a guy like him into the first round. I think he's gotten a lot better over the years. As a sophomore, he really was not that good of a player, but he has steadily improved and has turned himself into a potential top 50 pick. I think all three of these guys certainly make an interesting case for the top left tackle off the board. Behind them, again, it's not overly deep, but I do like Kawika Rogers out of Oregon. He's had a nice year. Connor Dunmore, Charles Jagusa. You've got Alvin Ebusele from Baylor. Jordan Seaton, only 21 years old, very high ceiling. Spencer Fano from Kansas, the transfer from Utah. He's been inconsistent this year, pushing him to the 7th round. And then Nathan Roy, 21 years old out of Minnesota. Immense physical gifts, but he is really, really raw. That'll move us to right tackle with the highest projected offensive lineman in the class, and it is Daughtry Richardson from Florida Atlantic. Yes, FAU might get a top 10 pick. I was a little bit surprised at first too, but when I crunched the numbers, I think he's the best tackle prospect in the draft. 6'5", 320 pounds, another guy with good size, good length, good athletic gifts. I think he has the best overall mix of consistency in the run game along with dominance in the passing game compared to the other tackles we've gone over. Now, he's actually had his worst season as a pass protector this year, which isn't ideal, but his overall body of work as a starter over the last 3 years has been too much to ignore and too much to keep him outside of the top 15 at worst. Tree Bobalade from South Carolina is up next. A really fun name, first of all. He has an interesting case to be the top right tackle off the board, and the biggest thing going for him is that he plays in the SEC. Richardson plays for a group of 5 school. Babalade is playing against NFL pass rushers every week, and you can make the argument he's been a little bit better as a pass protector this season. I don't think he's quite the run blocker, though, that Richardson is, which ultimately gives him the edge. Looking at day 2, again, not overly deep. If you want to tackle, you probably need to get one early. I do like KD Arnold quite a bit out of Jacksonville State. Another small school guy, but Jacksonville State has done a terrific job over the last few years of developing and churning out offensive linemen. 6'7", 335. He is built like an ox and will bully you in the run game, manhandling and leveling defensive players. Now, he's not necessarily overly consistent on a snap-by-snap basis in the run game, but his individual wins are really impressive. So an interesting group of tackles here. Behind them, I like Andre Roy Jr. from Clemson. It's just that he is really undersized. He's got to add some weight, but he's had a phenomenal year. And then looking for a sleeper, I like Tanyan Zachary out of Tulsa. He's had a very strong season. I think it's a good guard class. Maybe not as good as last year's, but still one of the stronger position groups in this class. We'll start with Olavide Ione from Penn State. He's really intriguing to me because NFL scouts are going to drool over his athletic profile and his ability to move at his size. 6'3", 345. He is a large human being, but he glides around the field like a ballerina. He's got great footwork and has great lateral quickness for somebody of his size, and that, given his improvements as a blocker, suggests that he could be a really good NFL player. Behind him, Solatoa Moei from Utah is up next. He's developed into a really solid player for the Utes. I like his overall skill set. 6'5", 330 pounds. Another very, very big human being. His lateral mobility is also very, very impressive at his size. And he's a really, really good pass protector. He's only let up 4 sacks in his career with Utah. So I think this is somebody who has a lot of similarities to Ione out of Penn State. He's just a little bit smaller, maybe a little bit less athletic, but regardless, 2 very similar prospects. Behind them, Caden Green is a name to watch from Missouri. Talented player who hasn't necessarily put it all together at the collegiate level. James Livingston from Kansas is up next. Converted from tackle to guard, where he has really broken out for our Jayhawks this year. I didn't think he was very good last year at tackle. He was inconsistent in pass protection. It felt like he was called for a holding penalty just about every game. But as a guard, he's been one of the best players at the position in the country. And you look at someone who has the versatility, the size and the length to play on the outside at tackle, to play inside at guard. His pass protection has gotten so much better this year. His discipline in terms of penalties has gotten so much better this year. He's the type of kid you want to bet on, somebody who has consistently put in the work to get better over the years, and I think he's going to way outperform his draft slot if he declares. Keep in mind, he's a redshirt junior. I think he's going to leave for the draft, but he may very well come back. As we look at right guard, a few very good players here, including multiple projected top 50 picks. We'll start with Tai Chan out of the University of Notre Dame. 6'4", around 315 pounds. I don't think he has the ceiling that some of the left guards we talked about does. He's just not as big as them. He's not as quick as them. But I think he's a little bit more polished. I think the floor is a bit higher. He has allowed the same amount of sacks in his collegiate career as you and me. 0. This is a dominant pass blocker who Notre Dame is going to be without for the rest of the year. He dislocated his ankle this past week. It's not going to be an issue for him in draft prep and into training camp. But Notre Dame, likely to make the college football playoff. He will not be available for them. A huge loss. He is such an important offensive lineman for them. Nonetheless, some team is going to see the production and I think really fall in love with him. Aliou Ba from Maryland is an intriguing player. I think he's a little bit bigger. Another guy who has a little bit higher of a ceiling than Tai Chan. His production really isn't that far off, though, and I could see a team really talking themselves into him as early as the late first round. He's only allowed 1 sack in each of the last 3 years, so a very consistent pass protector in his own right. Really solid run blocker as well. He's just a very, very consistent player on a snap-by-snap basis. He doesn't make mistakes. He isn't called for penalties. Again, he doesn't allow a lot of sacks and pressures, and I think he's going to be a very impactful NFL player right away. Behind them, the former 5-star Zach Rice from North Carolina leads the group as we move over to center. We've had some good center prospects in this series, and I don't think this is necessarily a top-heavy group, but I think it is a deep one, unlike the tackle and, to a lesser extent, the guards. Oregon's Ayapani Laluulu is the current top-projected center in this year's draft class. Very solid player over the last 2 years at 6'2", 325 pounds. Oregon's offensive line has been really consistent, a big reason why, obviously, they won the national championship just a season ago. He's a pretty good run blocker, solid in pass protection as well, and I think he's a little bit more battle-tested than some of these other linemen in this class, especially considering the improvements he's made from last year to this year where he hasn't allowed any sacks. Grayson Maines from Temple's a very solid player in his own right. Malachi Preciado out of South Alabama, and Mark Nobu Jr. from Texas A&M, also currently projected in the top 100. And then down the board, you've got Drew Bobo from Georgia. A potential gem is Hayden Harlan from New Mexico State. So let's move over to the defensive line. And obviously, this was the identity of our team last year, and I feel like that's kind of gone away. Nick Benito and Baron Browning are still putting up the big sack numbers, but everybody else isn't. Mykel Williams certainly has not taken the step we would have hoped for here in year number 2. And he's hurt right now as well, so he's not even healthy to try to prove himself. Jonathan Cooper, double-digit sacks last year, nowhere near the case this season. His contract extension has not been worth it so far. Cameron Hayward is just a role player. Jordan Davis is just a role player. Nick Benito has put up the big numbers, and he's been good, but I don't think he's been as consistent as he was last year. B.J. Ojolari's been an inconsistent acquisition for us. Again, I feel like Baron Browning's the only guy who has met the expectation, and with him not healthy, the pass rush, especially Nick Benito, has really faltered. I think this is a solid edge class. Not particularly great at the top, though. Normally, you find somebody in the top 10. That's not going to be the case this year. I think the second and third round is really the sweet spot, but there are still some good players who will go in the first round, including a name who we should know very well. If you've been watching the Kansas Dynasty, the emergence of Travion Ford has been absolutely huge for the Jayhawk defense. The transfer from Toledo a couple of years ago, Ford has turned into one of the most dynamic pass rushers in college football, and has played his way into the first round. 6'4", 275 pounds. This is somebody who can really convert speed to power very quickly. He wins with power off the edge. This is somebody who's got pretty solid get-off. He's a good run defender. He had 2 more sacks in our last game against Toledo. I think 1.5 to be specific. So he's now at 12.5 sacks on the year, which is amongst the leaders in the Big 12. He's been so good this year. He's been so important for the Kansas defense, and I think given his size and physical profile along with the production, there's no reason to think he doesn't go in the first round. Again, though, I think day 2 is the sweet spot if you're looking for an edge. Landon Dean from Oklahoma State has really developed over the last couple of years, and he's turned into one of the better pass rushers in the Big 12 himself. 6'5", 270 pounds, somebody who I think can be on the field on all 3 downs like Travion Ford, because he can stop the run, and obviously he's productive as a pass rusher as well. Really didn't have a role on the defense until last year, but he had 7 sacks a year ago, 8.5 this season, and his emergence has put himself into the potentially second round of this year's draft. After him, we take a look at Keldrick Falk out of the University of Auburn. Falk has been a bigger name through the draft process over the last couple of years in the sense that he got off to a really good start at his Auburn career and was expected to be a high draft pick. And, well, that's going to happen. Now, I feel like he could have taken the step into being a first-rounder, and it hasn't necessarily been the case. But I still really like him as an NFL prospect. Very, very athletic player coming off the edge. And he wins in a variety of ways as a pass rusher. He can win with power. He can win with finesse. The sack numbers haven't really been there over the last couple of years. Teams have really put a lot of focus into stopping him. Only 7 sacks over the last 2 seasons combined after 7.5 as a sophomore, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think he's going to be a good player. Looking at some more names here, Travion Williams from Mississippi State, Will Height from Purdue. Both of those guys have helped anchored 2 of the top pass rushes in the country, and we'll be talking about a couple of their teammates pretty soon. But I want to look at Mateo Uiagalelei from Oregon, the former 5-star recruit. He certainly looks the part. 6'5", 270 pounds. Another guy who I think can be a 3-down player in the NFL. He's a good run defender. He's a well-rounded pass rusher. He was dominant last year, and coming into this season, I think he was a projected top 10, maybe top 15 pick. And he just hasn't really been as good over the last couple of years. He had 7 sacks as a sophomore, 9.5 as a junior. But defenses have found a way to stop him this year. His stock has gone down, but his play over the last couple of years has kept him projected within the first 2 rounds. Looking down the board, Christian Miller from Georgia, really high floor player. I don't think he's ever going to be a star, but he's going to be a rotation guy for a while. Demon Clowney from Charlotte, good player, cool name as well. As we move over to right end, there are more first-round guys here, and we'll start at the top with Eno Etta from Michigan. I think this is going to be one of the more polarizing players in this draft cycle when it's all said and done. I kind of see him as the Trayvon Walker of this class because there are way more proven guys who are projected behind him. Eno Etta had 2.5 career sacks coming into this season. He was a no-name, but he has really broken out. He's got 8 sacks currently for Michigan. The big reason why, though, he's the top projected edge rusher right now is the physical traits. 6'5", 295 pounds, but he moves like he's 30 pounds lighter. He glides on the field like a linebacker, but he's got the strength of somebody you look for at defensive tackle. His physical attributes will push him into the first round. Somebody was going to take a shot on the athleticism late in the draft coming into the year, but now that he's kind of put it all together as a pass rusher, it's hard to imagine him not going in the first round, even though there are other guys with way more sack production, such as the next 2 guys we're going to talk about, starting with Marion Winston from Oregon. He has been the most consistent pass rusher in college football over the last 2 years. 12.5 sacks as a junior, currently has 11 as a senior. He's just a really, really well-rounded player, but he does not have the physical tools that some of these other guys do. He's probably the most productive edge rusher in the class, but the physicals limit his ceiling a little bit. Nonetheless, you cannot ignore 23.5 sacks over the last 2 years. The guy knows how to hunt the quarterback, and I would certainly place a bet on him to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think he's one of the most polished players in this class. Let's talk about now one of the most polarizing players in the class. Etta is extremely polarizing, as is CJ Madden from Purdue. Madden's another guy who was kind of a no-name coming into this season. Unlike Etta, he doesn't necessarily have the elite physicals. If anything, he's extremely undersized. 6'4", 230, bottom percentile weight. But here's the thing. The dude's got damn near 20 sacks this year. As of when I recorded this, he was at 16.5. He added 3 more in Purdue's final regular season game against Penn State, winning the National Defensive Player of the Week. So he's now at like 19.5. Yes, he's undersized, yet he doesn't have the elite physicals, unlike Eno Etta. But 19.5 sacks. The guy can hunt the damn quarterback. Behind them, Ashun Shepard, the other talented pass rusher from Mississippi State. He's having a solid year. Let's talk about our good friend Tykius Brinkley, only 21 years old, a true junior. I'm not entirely sure if he's going to declare like James Livingston, but I figured I would throw him in here anyway so we can talk about what he looks like as an NFL prospect. Brinkley's a fascinating case because after his true freshman season, he probably would have been in the conversation to be the #1 pick. He had, 16 sacks as a true freshman? I mean, he was unblockable that season. He was playing against NFL tackles and producing. However, he's taken a step back over the last 2 seasons. He's been a good player, but not as good as he was as a freshman. Along with that, there are some questions with him. He's got elite get-off coming off the edge. He may be a one-trick pony as a pass rusher, overly relying on his finesse and quickness, but he is as good at that as any pass rusher in the draft. He's undersized, though, 6'3", 240. He's listed as 220 in EA College Football 25, but I don't think players can really gain weight, so I gave him an additional 20 pounds. Nonetheless, he is still undersized, though. Needs to be a little bit more consistent against the run, so he's got some work to do, but the ceiling is quite high. I mean, we saw the ceiling as a freshman when, again, he had 16 sacks through that year. Also want to highlight Logan Fano. That is Spencer Fano's brother. Of course, Spencer transferring away from his brother as we look at defensive tackle. This is one of the strongest position groups in this draft class. If you're a team at the top of the draft, you've got 2 choices in the top 10. If you miss out, you've got 5 or 6 other guys projected to go in the top 100. So we'll start with Jason Moore out of Ohio State, who unfortunately just tore his ACL a couple of weeks ago. So his status for training camp and early this upcoming season is in doubt, and I would expect he misses around half of his rookie year with the injury. So that could certainly sway some teams away from picking him. But if someone's willing to look past that, I could see him going as early as the top 10. Freak athlete, unbelievable get-off. My question with Moore is if he has the anchor and the strength to hold up in the run game. The production as a pass rusher is certainly there. Over 20 sacks within the last 3 years. You combine that with his impressive physical upside, you're looking at a top 10 pick. But he has some noticeable weaknesses. Again, his play strength in the run game that he's going to have to clean up. Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy, the former 5-star, also slated to go in the top 10. He is also currently injured, but his is certainly not as big of a deal. He's a much better run defender than that of Jason Moore, and I think he's a little bit easier of a projection to the next level. But he doesn't necessarily have the elite quickness and get off the line of scrimmage that, say, Moore does, and because of that, I think his ceiling as a pass rusher is a little bit lower. He had 8 sacks as a junior, but only 3.5 this year, and I think that's largely because teams have really focused on him. Last year, he was surrounded by Nick Scorton and Shamar Stewart and Cassius Howell. All those guys are gone now. He's been the #1 pass rusher, and he's given them some good moments, but he hasn't necessarily been consistent in that area. Nonetheless, he is still really, really good, and you combine that with his great ability in the run game, you're looking at a top 10 pick. Keanu Tanuvasa from Utah has really become a good player for the Utes, pushing himself into the first round. He bursted onto the scene in week 1 this year with 4 sacks against Houston, albeit he was playing against maybe the worst offensive lineman in the country, who has allowed, no joke, 25 sacks this year. But Tanuvasa is just a professional pass rusher. 6.5 sacks as a sophomore, 7.5 as a junior, 9.5 as a senior. Another guy like Amarian Winston from Oregon, to where he doesn't necessarily have the elite physicals, but the guy can hunt the damn quarterback. And because of that, I think you're looking at someone who's going to certainly be in the running for Defensive Rookie of the Year and probably make an earlier impact than both Moore and Brownlow-Dindy. As we look at day 2, really strong crop of guys here, including Brownlow-Dindy's teammate at Texas A&M, another former 5-star with DJ Hicks, who's been a rotational defensive lineman for the Aggies over the last few years. He's finally gotten his opportunity to get consistent reps as a starter, and he is also injured with a hip injury. He would be a perfect fit for the Golden State Warriors. But what I think teams are going to like about him is the variety of ways he wins as a pass rusher. He can win with finesse. He can win with power. He's a good run defender. And the stats back it up. At least 6 sacks within the last 2 seasons. But I really think his best football is ahead of them. I think he's got a really high ceiling given the combination of pass rushing moves that he has in his arsenal. And I think he's being slept on a little bit. I think he belongs in the first round. Let's talk about Tyson Ford out of Notre Dame. I am convinced he is related to Travion Ford. The two of them look alike. Obviously, they had the same name. They're both from St. Louis, albeit they went to 2 different high schools. I did some searching, and it turns out, at the very least, they're not brothers, but there wasn't really that much other information. I feel like they have to be related in some way. What they also have in common is that they're both damn good football players as well. Obviously, we know Travion quite well, but let's introduce ourselves to Tyson. He doesn't necessarily have a deep bag of pass rushing moves, but he knows how to win with power. That's his big strength. You don't necessarily need a deep bag to be successful. Look at Giannis Antetokounmpo. 8.5 sacks as a junior. That number has gone down this year, but still a really, really productive player. Terrence Green from Oregon, very solid run defender. He's improved as a pass rusher. Bledsoe from Texas A&M, Jari Bledsoe. I think he's got a really high ceiling, could be a very good player. Caden Cashin, the redshirt junior from USC, has been one of the most productive pass rushers in the country. Currently sits at over 12 sacks on the year. Another guy who just knows how to hunt the quarterback. I think he relies on his overall strength a little bit too much, though, and he doesn't really have great pass rushing technique. Now, you can make the argument that it's just that much more impressive that he has 12.5 sacks to go along with being a really good run defender. But there are still some questions with his game. He's winning a lot of easier reps, and I'm curious to see how he will translate to the NFL. Looking at day 3, some names to watch out for include Dejan Lafferty, a redshirt junior from Fresno State, who is expected to declare at the end of the year. I like Ahmed Moten Sr. out of Miami. I think he's going to be a really good nose tackle, high floor guy. Khalil Dinkins, another guy from Mississippi State. We've talked about a few of their pass rushers today. Loaded defensive line. The biggest reason why the Bulldogs have one of the best defenses in the country with, 10 games allowing 13 or less points? So that'll wrap up the prospect profile. Let's now put our attention to the Las Vegas Raiders, who are only 5-7, but they have some major strengths. Number 2 rushing offense, number 3 rushing defense, and they also have a top 10 scoring defense as well. They may be 5-7, but their season has been the complete opposite of us. They started the year on a 5-game losing streak, but since then they have won 5 of their last 7 games. So it's basically our season, but in complete reverse. The Raiders are playing the best football of their year over the last couple of weeks. 35-6 against New England, 28-7 against a good Chargers team who swept us during our losing streak. The Raiders are playing better than just about anyone right now, whereas obviously we are not. Now the Raiders have some familiar faces, of course. Jalen Daniels leading the way at quarterback, the former number 4 overall pick, and unfortunately, Daniels has not gotten off to a great start in his career, but it seems like he's finally starting to turn the corner a little bit, coming off of 2 of the best games of his career. You got to be patient with these young quarterbacks. Both him and Jalen Milroe struggled as rookies, but Milroe's an MVP candidate here in year 2, and Jalen Daniels appears to be really coming along. As we look at his notable performances as of recent, in the game against New England, every single one of his passes was caught. Granted, that includes 2 interceptions, but still, you get the point. Against the Chargers, of course, he was fantastic as well, but we got to shout out his great skill position group, led by his Kansas teammate Devin Neal, who is already the 4th highest rated running back in the NFL. I think he's 5th in the league in rushing yards right now. He's going to be a problem for a long time, and if Jalen Daniels develops, look out. They've got some good skill position players out wide. Devontae Smith, who they got on draft night. Jacoby Myers is currently injured, but that just means more of an opportunity for the talented youngster Jaden Higgins in his 2nd year out of Iowa State. And we can't forget about Brock Bowers, who dominates whenever these 2 teams play against each other. The defensive line is the strength of this team. We know Max Crosby. He's one of the best in the league. Christian Wilkins is quite good, though, as well. The offensive line is productive, too. And I'm excited to see how Avion Terrell looks, the 7th overall pick, cornerback out of Clemson. Obviously, we picked a different corner, Colin Wright, ahead of him, who's had a pretty good rookie year, albeit he's played worse over the last month, but so is everybody else on the roster. It's not just him. A huge game for both of these teams. The Broncos, after starting the year 5-2, have lost 5 in a row. The Raiders, the complete opposite, started 0-5, but have won 5 of their last 7. Both of these teams are hanging on for dear life. Playoffs is unlikely, but it becomes an afterthought for the loser. So both of these teams have a whole lot to play for within this matchup. Raiders start with it. Devin Neal up the middle, gets by his former Kansas teammate Marvin Grant, and he gets around 11 yards before being tackled by Riley Moss. Fun to see all the Jayhawks on the field today, especially Neal and Daniels, as Jalen's going to keep it on the read option. We know he can run. Maybe not like Clyde Poole, but still a productive runner nonetheless. Was tied for the college football lead in rushing touchdowns as a senior. Granted, he played more games than everybody else, as Devin Neal's up the middle for a first down. Right now, the Raiders are ramming it down our throat. Jalen Daniels has not really had to throw the ball at all. They are just running it at will. The defensive line not looking too strong so far, as Daniels is sacked, though, on first down. Cameron Hayward and Jonathan Cooper will each get credited with half a sack, but Nito was there with pressure as well, as it is now a 2nd down and 13. Daniels will look to throw it. He is under more pressure, and he is sacked by Ojulari. Finally, B.J. Ojulari gets his first sack of the year. Does this mean he's going to get his first win as well? Daniels has not done a great job against pressure in the NFL, which is odd because he was great at that at Kansas. 3rd and 21, he's going to wisely throw it away. Smart decision there. Nobody was open. The problem is, though, the Raiders are going to have to punt it after what was a really good drive. We're going to start with it at the 17. Ashton Jeanty to the left side. Gets some blocks. Jukes away from the safety. What a start for Ashton Jeanty as he gets 22. We're calling on Jeanty to really produce over the last 5 weeks. Just because he's 3rd in rushing doesn't necessarily mean he's been the 3rd best back in the NFL. The line has not done him favors, but we certainly need him to play well. Play action, Nix on the run, floats it up and it's caught! Rivaldo Fairweather, what a catch by the second-year tight end out of Auburn. I don't know how he held on to that one. From the 44 up the middle, Tez Johnson with it. Whoop! Jukes by Terrell and is wrapped up at the 25. One of the big differences between Terrell and Colin Wright is what Wright provides around the line of scrimmage. He's a much better tackler, and I think he's more consistent in coverage as well. Terrell just happens to have those otherworldly ball skills. Here's Genti to the outside, another first down run. This has been maybe the best start to a drive I've seen all year. 4 plays, 4 first downs. Now it's a 3rd and 6, though, up the middle, incomplete for Tez Johnson. So we started the drive off so well just to falter in the red zone. Scoring in the red area is important, kids. 26-yard field goal for Will Lutz is good, so at least we get points. Overall, a really good first drive. The offense looks fantastic, but feels like we could have gotten more there with how well it started. Dylan Lobb will return the kick for the Raiders. He breaks a tackle, stiff arms Savon Revel down the sideline. He is wrapped up at around the 50 by Javon McIntyre. Why does Savon Revel have so many negative plays that just end up being kind of hilarious? I kind of feel for the guy. I thought he had a good game at safety a couple weeks ago, replacing the injured Riley Moss, but still, he is a funny player. 2nd and 8 up the middle. Devontae Smith swerving through defenders. He gets it to around the 32-yard line. The Raiders traded their 2nd rounder to Philadelphia to acquire the talented standout receiver, as they now have it at the 17. Play action. Daniels looks to throw it up the middle. This is Jaden Higgins who brings it to the 1. Big-bodied, physical receiver. I think he's really got a chance to break out soon. And then on 1st and goal, Devin Neal is in for a score. But hold your horses, not so fast. Devin Neal is celebrating, but I think this one is going to be coming back. A holding call on Emil Wagner, the rookie right tackle out of Notre Dame, who the Raiders used their other 2nd-round pick on. And that'll wrap up the first quarter. 3-0 lead, slow-paced game. We haven't really had the ball that long. We had a good opening drive, but we couldn't score in the red zone, and now we've got to get the Raiders' offense to do the same. Las Vegas doesn't have any points, but they've moved it pretty well over their first couple of drives. The first possession was stalled because of a couple of sacks. We'll see how the second one ends as Bowers catches it in the flat, breaks the tackle, and he is in. Brock Bowers with the score, and the Raiders take their first lead of the game as it is 7-3. Let's see how the offense can respond. Again, a good opening possession. Is on 1st down, Nix looks to throw it. He connects with Cooper Kupp, has space upfield, breaks the tackle, and is wrapped up a little bit past the 40. Good to see all the receivers getting involved early in this game, as we now have it at the 47. Nix, of course, looking for a go-to guy without Marvin Mims, as he goes short. Troy Franklin with it, past the 40, wrapped up at the 32. Another quick but very efficient drive here so far for the Broncos. 2nd and 8 at the 29. Nix in empty, alone in the backfield, scrambles, steps up, runs for the first down, fumbles, and it's scooped up by the Raiders. A costly turnover there for Denver, and to make matters worse, Bo Nix is grabbing at his knee. Yikes! That's not good news. Now, luckily, he's able to walk off on his own power, but he is going to the locker room, likely signaling that his game is over. And if we want to save the season, it will now be with a backup quarterback. We're really going to need the defense to step up, so letting Brock Bowers do that is not particularly encouraging. Raiders moving it well at the 26, up the middle, one-handed catch! Bowers to the 1, a gain of 25. Brock Bowers already has, what, like 6 catches at this point, probably like 70 yards. 1st and goal. Devin Neal. He is in for a touchdown, and the Raiders add to the lead. It's 14-3. We are down by 11 with a backup quarterback coming in. Our regular backup throughout the year has been Geno Smith, and if we were like 9-3, I would bring in Geno. But we're 5-7. What do we have to lose? The 5th-round rookie out of LSU, Garrett Nussmeier, will be coming in to play quarterback. Nussmeier really has not gotten many NFL snaps at all, so this will certainly be fascinating. His first pass of the game on 2nd and 7 is broken up. Tez Johnson had a step on the defender, Diablo, but the pass was underthrown. We're going to be heavily leaning on Ashton Jeanty on this possession. He's already gotten it 3 times since the start of the series. As on third down, Troy Franklin ends up with the first down. I think the goal here for Nussmeier is just to be smart and efficient. Play the point guard role. Don't necessarily force it downfield, but let your guys make plays after the catch. Jeanty to the outside. Whoop! Jukes by 2 defenders, and he gains 25. What a start for Ashton Jeanty. His 7 carries for 88 yards. He has been unbelievably efficient. So now we've got it at the 19. Really good drive here as Nussmeier goes short. Cooper Kupp outruns to the defender inside the 10 to around the 5. The offense is moving it efficiently. It's not necessarily because of Nussmeier, but he's avoiding mistakes. Second and goal. Jeanty walks it in for a touchdown. What a first half for Ashton Jeanty. He was incredible. Nearing the 100 yards mark already, and we're right back in the game. 14-10. The Raiders have a little over a minute left in the half as it's 3rd and 6. Daniels is sacked. Nick Bonito flying off the edge. 9th sack of the year as we are going to use a timeout looking to get some points here at the end of the half. Now the thing is, playing against the clock with around a minute and 2 timeouts, we can't necessarily force it to Ashton Jeanty. 9 carries for nearly 100 yards and a touchdown. He got the ball 6 times on the last drive. But if we want to score here, we're going to have to rely on Nussmeier. Sure enough, we will start with a screen. And look at Jeanty getting by these defenders. What a play by Ashton Jeanty to the 48-yard line. Where has this guy been all year? I mean, he has been incredible in this game as we're going to use timeout number 2. We didn't get much for the following couple of plays with a pair of incompletions as it is now a 3rd down and 10. Nussmeier looks to throw it up the middle. He was wide open. Bo Nix, I think, makes that throw, but it was a little bit low and behind for Zamir White. So that'll force a punt. Raiders get it back. Not a lot of time left here in the half. They're going to have enough for one more play. Jalen Daniels knows he has to avoid the safety as Brock Bowers gets it to around the 25. And that'll wrap up the first half. It has been a start of all time. I think that's the best way to put it. In our most important game of the season yet, we trail 14-10. Bo Nix is out for the remainder of the game. They think it is a PCL injury. Non-contact, certainly scary. We are hoping for the best. But now we've just got to hop aboard the Nuss bus the rest of the way with Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback. And we'll talk about the keys to winning in the second half. But first, our halftime highlights. The Chiefs and the Chargers, both teams 8-4. This is for first place in the division. Kansas City took the first 2 months of the year off, and now they are doing Kansas City things. I was expecting a pretty good game here. It most certainly is not. This is a blowout. 31-10. Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. The Chargers have really struggled ever since Justin Herbert got injured against us. How come Seth Hennigan can torch our defense, but he struggles against the Raiders and the Chiefs? Earlier today in Indianapolis, the Colts, of course, as we know, barely missed the playoffs last year. I don't think that's going to happen again this year. Anthony Richardson's having another fantastic season. Jonathan Taylor would score twice in this game. A 28-10 win for the Colts. They will finish once again above 500 as they are now 9-4. Minnesota is 5-8. The Vikings have been perpetually irrelevant in this series. Kyron Drones has been a painfully mediocre player. I'm not sure if the Vikings had their long-term guy with him. And then in Tampa Bay, the Bucs are doing something quite fascinating. Baker Mayfield is injured, but they're not turning to Connor Wegman, their first-rounder. They're going to one of their day 3 guys, Sawyer Robertson, who has the Bucs trailing 17-10 with this touchdown by fellow rookie J. Michael Sturdivant, drafted at the end of the first round out of TCU. I'm not really sure the reasoning for Robertson getting the playing time over Wegman. Maybe the Bucs think Wegman is not the guy. Maybe they see something in Robertson to suggest that he's got the appeal of a franchise quarterback, even though he was only a 5th rounder. So as we go into the second half, obviously we're going to have to throw the ball somewhat productively. We're going to need Garrett Nussmeier to not be bad. But I think we're really going to rely on running the ball. We've ran it outside the numbers really well. So that's what we're going to continue to do. And then defensively, don't get beat short. That's where we have struggled. I want to give the offensive line a ton of credit, though. That was the best half from the line we got this year. As on 2nd and 11, here's Brazel. Outruns a couple defenders, and he gets it all the way to the 12. It's a gain of 50. Big play by the rookie Chris Brazel. Good throw by Nussmeier. But back to the offensive line. They have allowed no pressure, while Ashton Jeanty is carving up this defense in for his second touchdown of the game, and that will put the Broncos ahead. Jeanty has 100 yards and 2 scores. Both quarterbacks have had all day to throw the ball, and the Raiders have a good defensive line. Max Crosby is getting shut down by the rookie, Francis Mauigoa, in his first NFL start. So it's now 17-14. Raiders got to respond. Their offense started well, but they've been quiet since. Jalen Daniels is sacked on the play. Took a second, but Benito brings him down along with B.J. Ojulari. Ojulari's having his best game as a Bronco. Benito's having a good game. Raiders would punt it. Denver gets it back. 5.5 minutes to go in the third. Nussmeier looks to throw it on 3rd and 7. On the run, under pressure with a dot. Tez Johnson past the 50 to the 45. That's Nussmeier's best throw of the game. Under pressure, not an easy play to make. We know Bo Nix excels in play action. Now we get to see Nussmeier do it. 3rd and inches. Jeanty loses about 3. Wrapped up by Divine Diablo. I wanted to run the ball to put us in a 4th and short to go for it spot. But it's 4th and 3. We're just going to have to take the points. Lutz barely gets that one to squeak in, as it is now 20-14. Overall, a really good third quarter up to this point. Let's keep it that way, though, shall we? 1st and 10 at the 30. Daniels has an open man. Nice grab by Jaden Higgins, who was hit quickly. Good closeout defensively by Colin Wright, but not before Higgins gets the first down. 2nd and 2 at the 43. Daniels looks to throw it up the middle. Higgins again, out of the slot this time. Gets it to the 31, where he is tackled by Chris Abrams-Drain. 2nd and 11 now from the 32. Devin Neal loses 3. Jeffrey Bossa brings him down. We have been singing Bossa's praises throughout the year. He's been one of the best off-ball linebackers in the NFL. Leads the league in tackles. He's up there in terms of TFLs. He's been a good covered player. 3rd and 14. Daniels is sacked again. 2.5 for Nick Benito this afternoon. Jalen Daniels has played a good game, but he has taken a couple of game-breaking sacks to take the Raiders out of field goal range, including that one. Nick Benito's having himself a day, as that'll wrap up the third. We played such a good quarter, yet the game wants to show the play where Bo Nix fumbles and potentially suffers a long-term knee injury. I see how it is, EA. Nonetheless, we played really well in that third quarter on both sides of the field. 10 points on offense, 0 on defense. Let's keep it going here in the fourth. At the 17 on 1st down, Nussmeier dances around under pressure. He's got Jonnu Smith for 30. That was another really nice play by Nussmeier. It helps that he had time from the offensive line, but not an easy throw to make on the run. It was a little bit behind Smith, but good enough to where Smith could still make the catch. 3rd and 8. Nussmeier steps up, looks to scramble, runs, and he does not get the first down. Was he not very clearly past the line? We are literally centimeters away from getting a first down, so you bet your bottom dollar we will be going for this, as Jeanty gets the first. A couple of their defensive linemen won their blocks, but luckily there was space up the middle, and Jeanty, with his vision, is able to get the play. 6.5 to go at the 39. Nussmeier looking deep. Jeanty, wide open, he makes the catch! Ashton Jeanty, have yourself an afternoon! That's a hat trick. His 3rd touchdown of the game. First in the career of Garrett Nussmeier. And the Broncos, with a backup quarterback, are fully clicking right now on offense. Garrett Nussmeier, dare I say, has been legitimately good in this second half. Ashton Jeanty's been a superstar today. The offensive line is still balling. As for the 2-point conversion, Nuss is under pressure, tries to send it to Tez Johnson, but it's incomplete, and so it will remain 26-14. The Raiders have not scored in about 2 quarters worth of action. They've got to get it together. The offensive line is going to have to wake up and let Jalen Daniels do his thing, as it's an RPO, loss of 2 for Trey Tucker. He's tackled by Chris Abrams-Drain. 3rd and 12 now. Pivotal play for the Raiders. They've got to get this. Daniels looks to throw it. It is broken up in the secondary. Devontae Smith has been shut down by his former Alabama teammate Patrick Surtain. 4th and 12. What do the Raiders have to lose here? They're going to go for it. Daniels looks to throw it. It is broken up by Surtain again. Bold strategy, targeting arguably the best defensive back in the NFL on back-to-back plays. So we now have it back. We've got great field position. We should be able to chew some clock and finally snap the losing streak as Genty gets the stiff arm for a first down. 20 carries, 141 rushing yards to go along with 2 touchdowns on the ground and a 39-yard touchdown through the air. 3rd and 7, Genty to the outside, breaks the tackle, and he gets 6. What's the decision here? 4th and 1, 2.5 minutes to go. We're going to go for it, and I think you guys know exactly who is getting the ball here. Nussmeier, Genty, does not get the touchdown, but he does get the first down, and that's probably the best thing that could have happened because we get to drain the clock to the 2-minute warning. 1st and goal, Genty is in, his 4th touchdown of the game. This is the Ashton Genty we have been waiting for all season long. He finally has a game where the offensive line plays really well. You see what happens when the guys up front block? This! So now the Raiders are down big, 4th and 1. Devin Neal runs into his own blocker, doesn't get the first down, and that should probably just about do it. The losing streak is over. Finally, thank God, after losing 5 games in a row, the Denver Broncos come to Vegas and knock off the red-hot Raiders. Yes, I get that the Raiders were under 500 coming into this game, but they were playing better football than just about anyone. This is legitimately a good win. I mean, we played really well every phase. Ashton Genty was ungoddamn believable in this game, but I've got to give credit to the trenches. I've been critical of the offensive and defensive lines this year, but they clearly saw the prospect profile. They were worried they were going to get replaced and had their best games of the year. We had 5 sacks. We were sending plenty of pass rush. The run defense was phenomenal. Devin Neal was not all that impressive today. And then the offensive line, where has this been all year? No sacks. I think the Raiders had 2 tackles for loss the entire game. However, the play of the line was arguably overshadowed by the quarterback change. Bo Nix was playing well before he fumbled and got hurt. Garrett Nussmeier comes in, and he played a really good game, I'm not going to lie. He looked a little bit timid in the first half, but he got comfortable in the second half, and he had a few really nice throws. Now, I will say that touchdown is about as easy of a pass as he's going to make, but credit to him, he made the throw. Jalen Daniels, I thought, had a good game, but certainly not as good as this guy. 24 for 152 and 3 touchdowns on the ground for Genty, who is also our leading receiver. 3 catches, 56 yards, and a score. Brock Bowers productive for the Raiders, but for us, everybody got the love in terms of the passing game. Garrett Nussmeier didn't really find a go-to guy per se. And again, shout out the offensive line. I want to give a special shout out to Francis Mauigoa. First career start. I wanted to see what he was made of against Max Crosby, and he was really good. We will definitely be keeping him in the starting lineup going forward. Nick Benito and B.J. Ojolari led the way off the edge with 6 TFLs and 4 sacks, but I want to give credit to everybody on the defense. The Raiders' offense started strong, 14 early points, and then over the last 25 minutes, they got nothing. We didn't even get a turnover in this game. It was consistent run defense, solid coverage, good pass rush. And you'll notice here, there are no new injuries. Bo Nix is good to go next week. It was a PCL sprain, not a long-term thing. So he's healthy. Harold Fannin will be back. Baron Browning will be back. Harrison Whaley, we're going to take him off of IR. Things might be looking up for us. As for the players of the week, I was hoping to see Ashton Genty. Patrick Mahomes threw 6 touchdowns, so it's hard to argue with that. He's joined by Brock Purdy, Braylon Trice, and Gregory Rousseau. So that brings us to a huge game against the Texans. If we want to make the playoffs, we have to win this game because we're going to have to jump like 5 teams ahead of us, one of which is Houston, who is currently a wild card team in the AFC. I believe they are currently the number 5 seed. We've also got to have a discussion about the quarterback position. Bo Nix has been good this year, and he hasn't played in a game where the offensive line played this well, but it's hard to ignore how well Garrett Nussmeier played. I mean, he balled out in this game, so I'm curious to see what you guys have to say down below in the comments. I kind of have a feeling where you guys are going with this, but I'm still curious nonetheless. Hope everybody enjoyed the episode. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.